Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Expansive CEO podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Chapman, and today my guest is someone who's so special to my heart. I had the absolute pleasure of meeting her through another guest who's been on the podcast a couple of times, Lindsay Bonadonna. Um, who is building an amazing business herself. And so, of course, she's connected to just other amazing human beings. And this conversation today is going to be centered a lot around grief and our experiences with grief and all the different ways it shows up and the different ways that we can use that to grow and to transform and to just get to know ourselves even better. So, Krista Powers is here with me today. She is a powerful catalyst and committed contributor to the communal conversation about grief. As the executive director of Giving Voice Foundation, she dedicates her work to building essential connections and providing support for those impacted by dementia. Drawing on 3 decades of service across the healthcare, nonprofit, education, and business sectors, Krista is a dynamic author, speaker, and coach. She's a two-time cancer thriver. She passionately shines a light on the inherent power of every human in both professional and personal settings. And Krista, I am so excited to maybe be the first. Am I maybe the first person to say that your new book, Good Grief, Inviting Grief to be a Catalyst for Growth, is out now and available for sale? Is that true? Or am I the first
It's
podcast?
true. It's true. I feel like a surge of energy hearing that. Thank you for saying it and proclaiming it.
Yes, I'm so excited. I'm so honored to have gotten an advanced copy of the book and to have been able to read it already. We'll say all this later too, but the links are in the show notes for anyone to go and get it. Again, that's Good Grief, Inviting Grief to be a Catalyst for Growth. And it really sums up your journey so far. You have been through a lot, grief in a lot of different ways that you really expand on in the book. Um, and I would love, love, love for you to tell us more who you are, how you got here, and what this journey has been like so far.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I just love being in space and conversation with you. So I always like to introduce myself not by the hats I wear or roles that I play, rather in who I be and how I show up. And so I like to share that I am a loving, powerful, authentic human, and that then ripples into all of the spaces that I like to play in. And I would say when you ask about how did I get to here, my background is definitely a story of the nurture. You know, when you think about nurture and nature, I see that my family of origin really raised me to be exposed to a lot of different experiences in life. And early on in life, my sister and I would go to funerals with my parents, and we would interact with people who were ill or who had different things happening in their lives. And so it was never a scary or not talked about sort of topic. And so from a very young age, I got really intrigued by aging and death and dying. And so for all of my career, I've really been focused on the aging population of our culture and serving in that realm. And then went into my own, I launched my own business where it really talked about leadership, personal development, and rippled into, other sort of arenas of life. And what I found, I would say in the past probably 5 to 10 years of life, probably in my 40s, late 30s and 40s, is that commitment to and curiosity with aging and death and dying really opened up into my own understanding of grief. And it's certainly because of some of my own life experiences. But what I realized was, gosh, it's not just about when a person's life comes to an end that has such power and magnitude that I think our culture can expand on how we understand and ritualize that moment of life. It's also about all the little moments throughout our everyday life where grief enters. It knocks on the door and it enters sometimes with force, sometimes gently, and really starting to look at, oh my gosh, I've lived through a ton of grief. And as I put my head up and look out at the people in my circle and the people in my community, there's grief everywhere. And I would venture to say that we might be finding ourselves right now in a time where it's the issue that we perhaps have not put nearly enough energy into, and yet it's impacting everyone. Grief is upon us, I believe, and that's where my heart is just radiating with hope and interest and curiosity to be part of the conversation. And I'm happy to delve into some specifics about my journey. I think that might help illuminate a bit more, but that's just a little bit of background of the path that ultimately brought me to here and to this book and to the conversation about grief.
Mm. Yeah, before we started recording, one of the things that really jumped out at me again from reading the book and from reflecting on my own journey and own experiences of grief is that in society, a lot of times we see grief when we think of grief, we think of close loved one dying, right? We
Mhm,
think of, when like a grieving widow or widower, right? We think of like those super heavy moments, or it could be a longtime family pet dying. It could be, like a really tragic loss of a
mhm,
family member. It could be the loss of a job that like was sustaining your whole family, right? We think of like big moments of grief.
mhm.
And that makes it seem really scary
Yes.
because we don't want to, we don't think being in the financial advisor seat and like knowing this conversation around death and dying. Like people don't like to talk
Mhm,
about dying. They don't want to talk about, creating an estate plan. They don't want to talk about life insurance or disability, right? Because it makes them feel that and almost anticipatory grief of like,
mhm,
ooh, that already feels bad. I want to push that away.
mhm. Yes.
And what was kind of occurring to me as I was reading and then as we were talking, like you're also talking about all the little spaces of grief along the way.
Mhm,
And just like when we, talk about in a marriage or in a relationship, if you take care of the small things, the big things take care of themselves. Why is that? Because we practice relating
mhm.
to one another, we practice supporting one another in small ways, and then the big things, you have that practice.
Yes.
But we don't see that necessarily with grief. We want to like smush it down and pretend it's not there.
Absolutely. And so then when the big grief moments come, we're ill-equipped, and I think we kind of do the fight, flight, freeze sort of moment of what do I do with this? And we can find ourselves in paralysis, or we get really frantic, and urgent and focused on the tasks, not at all focused on our heart. There's a certification that I got several years back, a decade or so back. It's based on a book called the Grief Recovery Handbook. And one of the stories they tell is through the training that I took is, if you think about if you're out and about running errands, if you're just out in the community and you're running errands and you trip on a curb and you break your leg, what are you going to do? And they give option A and option B. Option A is you're going to pick up your phone and you're going to call 911. You're going to, go to urgent care at the hospital and you're going to get your leg, you're going to go to surgery, get it fixed. You're going to have crutches. You're going to do PT and recover so that your leg comes back to full functioning. Or option B is you're going to pull yourself up off the curb with your broken leg and you're going to drag it along and finish your errands, and you're going to get in your car and get home, and you're going to hobble along for the rest of your life with this injured leg and never tend to it. And in that scenario, it's so obvious what we're going to do. We're going to do option A every time. But what they talk about is often our hearts get broken and we do option B. We hobble along with a broken heart. And I think that that so often happens with grief because we don't know what to do with it and how to heal and create completion energy and really find a way to remold our hearts from the breaks that happen in life. So yeah, as you're talking about kind of the small grief moments in life, how can we use them as opportunities to practice some different tools and techniques as we're going along so that we're more prepared?
Well, you had, in the book at least, you shared some bigger grief moments.
Mhm.
And so I would love if you can maybe share a little bit about your journey and maybe even well, I'll let you, of course, you decide what the best example is of this, but what were maybe some small moments of grief that you were able to process within some of the bigger things that you've
Mhm.
been going through over the last couple of years?
Yeah. So the most radical interruption I've had recently was back in the summer of 2023. I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And that journey spanned from 2023 very pretty deeply, a deep experience through the end of 2024. So it's kind of a 17-month process of a lot of treatments and procedures and tests and surgeries. And where I found myself at that point in life was as an entrepreneur. I was running my own business. And I quickly discovered after my first chemo treatment that I was not going to be able to fulfill my contracts that I had. I was not going to be able to continue meeting with clients. My mental capacity, my physical capacity just wasn't there. And so I had to make the choice to shut everything down. It felt like a very forced choice, of course, but ultimately I chose to do it. And it was terrifying, terrifying. And I'll speak a bit in a moment about some of the smaller grief moments through the journey of breast cancer, though I want to really highlight one of the things that stands out that I feel like I've not talked about a lot very openly, which was the financial impact of breast cancer. So I was 45 years old at the time, single. I did not have a nest egg of funds for myself at that point in life. I was three and a half years into my own business. So I was still, building, finding a good clip, and yet to have it just shut down so immediately was something that I wasn't prepared for. And where I found myself was in a space where I had to do some number crunching and look at what money do I need to pay for my mortgage, to pay for groceries, and to pay for my really high insurance deductible. And it turned out to equate to $60,000 to get me through 10 to 17 or so months of my process. And when I came to that number, I remember being in my living room and coming to that number because I had a friend and my parents and my partner saying, "What do you need?" And they were specifically asking me about the financial component of this because they knew I was terrified and I didn't know what to do with it. And when I came to that number, I remember feeling terrified and embarrassed and ashamed and very confused about, well, what do I do with this now? Right. And so ultimately I shared it with my friend who said, you know what? Great, $60,000. We're going to pull in your circle of support and we're going to ask people to give to you. And it was this moment of a lot of humility, by all means, yet also a lot of relief. It's like I was holding on to, I need to figure this out by myself. I was feeling kind of isolated at that point in the diagnosis. And like I said, embarrassed about being in the scenario I was in financially. And yet to have people say, okay, $60,000. And they weren't alarmed. They weren't throwing up the red flag, like, nope, I'm out. I can't help with that. And within 3 months, $60,000 was given to me through gifts of $10, $100, $1,000, $6,000. And it was one of the most radically um, beautiful acts that I've ever experienced. And for me, as I talk about grief of the expectations I had on myself and letting those just kind of be shattered into a million pieces and looking at how do I take all of those pieces and create the here and now version of myself, because I can't go back, right? I can't go to pre-diagnosis. I can't, start doing my contracts again and serving clients. So where am I today? And who am I going to ask for support from and receive support from? And that's what happened. And I guess, perhaps I'll just maybe pause there and take a breath, because again, I find it really vulnerable to talk about this, because I feel so passionately about being transparent and authentic with people, because I think that one of the tricky things about grief is we hide, we kind of encase ourselves, and maybe it's not hiding necessarily, but we encase ourselves to protect,
Hmm.
when something comes up, a diagnosis or job loss or divorce, we want to get as safe as possible. And I think that's just human nature, and that's okay. However, what if my story can impact somebody who's going to come across this scenario in their life, or they're able to support somebody else that's living through it? Because the grief of a health diagnosis is not only the physical body and what I went through to get through the breast cancer. It was financial, it was emotional, it was, the physical. And so it was all encompassing. And there were multiple grief bubbles happening throughout it all that could have probably wiped me out had I allowed it to. And yet it really was the opportunity to break my own stories around how it needed to go, and around my own lone wolfing, perhaps,
Hmm.
and my own, figure it out and hold it together, and all of those kind of silly stories that I used to really cling on to a lot more than I do now. Whew.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that vulnerability. You're so right that people, I mean, we don't talk about it a lot. Um, and the actual human impact, I think people, especially in the US, have an idea, that our health system is not set up to be supportive financially at all, for people. And yet we need to
Mhm.
hear the real stories. And the visual that was coming up for me as you were like talking about protecting yourself was a roly poly or a potato bug or pill
Yeah.
bug. They're called different things
Yes.
everywhere.
Yeah.
We called them potato bugs or roly polies when I was growing up. And like, right, they get scared and they just
Yeah.
ball up, right?
Yep.
Like full armor.
Yes.
And we do that. We go tight,
Hmm.
like as tight as you can go a lot of times around that to protect that soft
Hmm.
belly.
Underbelly. Yeah.
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 And on the financial side, I mean, I'll share fully, like, for me, when I saw that you needed help, it was a joy
Mm,
to send you the things that you wanted, right? Like it literally, like it felt good to me
mm,
to be able to support you, even in
mm,
a small way, right? Like, and we forget when we ball up super tight, you're literally taking away your awareness too from what's
mhm.
around
Yes.
rather than
And
being open to receive.
and and I guess if I'm hearing you, taking that opportunity away from you to do what you can to pour into me, which, I'm hearing you say, and man, it hits me all over again in the moment. I'm hearing you say you were happy to do it. It felt good. You wanted to, and you and 120 other people chose to do that, and as a result it made life exponentially easier. It took that weight and pressure off of me so that I could open back up. That roly
Hmm.
poly kind of release that clutched tightness, and open back up in order to heal, in order to be well again, in order to pay it forward. All of these things that allow me to show up in the world again after a long period of time. It felt like a very long period of time, the whole scenario of breast cancer. Yet if I did not receive, I was taking that away from you all. And just it speaks so clearly to me of our interconnectedness
Hmm.
and how we get to show up for one another.
Yeah, absolutely. On like a very, again, on a very fundamental level.
Mhm,
Um, I think that, part of that allowing and inviting was the word that used in the title, right? Inviting grief to be a catalyst for growth. Um, for most, I think, of my own growth journey, it has not been in a vacuum. It has
mhm,
not been in isolation, right? There are certain things that we have to do, that we have to resource ourselves for, that
mhm,
we, like take internal responsibility, have a lot of, a lot of that self love and self nurturing does, come from inside. But most of the journey is, how are you showing up with and for others?
mhm. Yes.
And so this grief being a catalyst for growth, I mean, like to me, there's interconnectedness, interdependence, like woven in through that whole story.
Yes. There's so many people who have done work in the realm of grief. One of the authors that I follow is David Kessler. He studied with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who really, is one of the pioneers. She created the 5 stages of grief, but he talks about grief requires a witness.
Mm,
And that's such a profound statement to me, because I think, again, if when we try to do our grief in a vacuum, we're not able to move through it fully, because grief demands and requires a witness. So, something as simple as a fender bender, getting into a fender bender. If you're, committed to, like, air quotes, not bothering anyone with the fender bender, and handling it yourself, and going through all the steps of what that means, like, maybe that qualifies as a little grief, to some, obviously subjective. But when we immediately then open it up and allow grief to be witnessed, it just becomes easier. Maybe someone knows who to contact at your insurance, and maybe someone, your insurance provider can say, hey, make these 2 phone calls instead of these 10 phone calls. And, a number of things can happen when our grief is witnessed. And again, I think grief just comes down to an interruption in our everyday flow. So it can, to call the fender bender grief, I absolutely am now starting to do that, to remind myself that grief is every day.
hmm.
And I'm not making light of the big grief moments when a loved one passes. I am, however, saying, hey, Krista, remember that grief is something that's a companion on my journey ultimately. And it's almost like a gentle voice that gets to speak to me to say, hey, slow down. Hey, how are you? Hey, let's check in. That's what I mean. Ultimately, breast cancer was a big interruption and a big grief experience, yet it did really call me into focus on, how am I? What's going on with my body? How can I be kinder so that I am well for decades to come?
Since you're using the language, I would love to dive a little bit more into the contents of the book, and talk about what you call the 5 powers of grief. Because
Sure.
you just said the first one, right? Is the interruption.
Yeah.
So can you outline the 5, and then we don't have to go through the whole thing, but I just like, yeah, I would love to give
Yeah.
people a little bit of that framework.
Absolutely. So, the first 3 powers of grief, I believe, happen typically. So, one is the interruption, and that's the diagnosis or the car accident or the divorce or the job loss, whatever it might be. The second power of grief is flow of feelings. And that can be, obviously the frustration, the anger, the denial. It can also be, if the interruption is your child going off to college, it can be the nervousness and the excitement and joy for them. So whatever feelings are flowing, I kind of name that as the second power of grief. The third power of grief I name as holding. And that's like, think of kind of white knuckling on holding on to what was, what we knew so well before the interruption, what, the easy cadence was, what our routine was, what worked. And then now there's something that's rubbing that and causing that to be different. So holding on to kind of what was before the interruption, which then leads to the fourth power of grief I call breaking. And I really thought about this when I named it because I, for the longest time, thought, no, that sounds horrible. I don't want to break by any means. And so I think my two caveats to this are one, it's not the last power of grief. So there's something that comes after it. And two, I found a little image of a little GIF out there in the world that's a picture of an egg that's cracked. And it says, when an egg cracks from internal pressure, it represents life. When it cracks and breaks from external pressure, it represents death. And that blew me away because I thought, oh, it's not a question if we're going to break. Breaking is going to happen. It's really a question of why am I going to break? Is it from expectations and pressures, or is it because I'm growing, I'm choosing, I'm becoming? So breaking, and you can also think of it's breaking our hold to the past, right? It can be named that way. And then the fifth power of grief I name as remembering. And so I like to picture kind of a vase that shattered into, 100 pieces in front of us on the floor or on the table, and really kind of picking up those pieces, some from the past, some from right now, some from our picture of the future, and making a new mosaic of ourselves. And so remembering ourselves into something in the here and now with whatever's going on with the interruption that has come.
Mm. The what was coming up for me as you were walking through those stages again is talking to a lot of the listeners of this podcast in particular are business owners,
Mhm.
um, and myself included, and a lot of us have had journeys of big grief to get to where we are professionally.
Mhm.
And I would say like my whole journey throughout, especially like the first year of my business, was filled with grief
Mhm.
of letting go of what was, letting go of what I thought would be my path, and letting go of, the future and the planning and the expectations and all of those things um, that I thought would be, and then
Mhm.
having to build something new while in the midst of that grief.
Yes.
And so there, yeah, there's like something swirling here in the conversation of like we like again, we all experience it. We all experience grief in everyday things. Um, but I think a lot of us, and maybe you can speak to this next, like especially with entrepreneurs, we we do start from a place of either proving or um, running away from something
Mhm.
that wasn't right, wasn't good for us,
Mhm.
and alchemizing or allowing, again, inviting that grief to be a catalyst for growth means transmuting that grief, means composting it, right? Using it for the compost of how do I grow into the version of me that's running towards something? Can you
Yeah.
speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. Well, just listening to you, I think of some of the grief moments as an entrepreneur as well of when I got no's, when I go and pitch a new project and I'd get a no, like all of the build up to that.
Yeah.
And of course, we all know that you have to get so many no's for one yes. My brain gets that, but the heart is like, oh man, that crushed me, and have to go regather and figure out how to tweak and how to, move forward. I would say part of what I talk about in the book is kind of a spectrum for each power of grief, where on one end, it's really heavy within the interruption and flow of feelings, holding, breaking, and remembering. There's a heavy part of each power of grief. And then there's a powerful end of the spectrum. And in the middle is the neutral space. So, if you're letting go of some hopes, some dreams as you're starting out as an entrepreneur, or you're getting to know and you're experiencing that grief, you might really feel some of that heaviness. And is there an opportunity to take one step, into the neutral phase, which I call curiosity and gentle awareness? So
Hmm.
it's real simple, easier said than done. I recognize. Though, can we step from heavy into neutral, or can you take two steps all the way to the powerful end of each spectrum? And for each power of grief, I can name what those powerful ends are. And it's almost like, I think of it two ways. One, turning a kaleidoscope where you just one
Mm.
little twist, gets you a whole new picture. Or I also can picture standing at the base of a mountain. And if I'm standing on the south side of the mountain and looking at the top, I have one image of it. And if someone's standing on the north side of the mountain at the base, they're getting a whole different picture. So it's just about kind of turning our own dial so that the heaviness of grief does not weigh us down for a duration of time. Because also, I'd say, Hannah, I'm okay. I think it's really important to feel the heaviness. I don't want to gloss over that. I believe it brings gifts. It maybe slows us and calls us into lessons and opportunities. Yet staying stuck in the heaviness of grief, I think there's some dangers there that we get to live in the full spectrum of neutral and powerful as well.
Yes, yeah, that what it feels like to me, and when I'm working through maybe like a particularly heavy money story or something from childhood that's coming up, um, either for myself or with clients, the staying on the feeling enough to process it is really important. I definitely am of that um I don't know, philosophy or in that camp that like we need to acknowledge and feel our feelings. Feel where they
Mm-hmm.
are in the body, feel where it's expressing, feel how it wants to move, right? And let it actually process because it's not partially, it's also a chemical process in the body,
Mm-hmm.
right? That like we need
Yes.
to allow that to go through and our body to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I've also learned from very, deep personal experience that the deeper I allow myself to feel, the more I let myself um, experience the heavy emotions, feel them through, allow it to be okay, the more joy I can feel on the other
Mm-hmm.
side, right? It literally opens the aperture
Mm-hmm.
of the spectrum.
Yes. Versus kind of living in that 80% middle and just some
Right.
some mediocre, right? Which
Yeah.
again, that there's time and space to be there, and yet to go deep and to go high, it's so beautiful. And I think as business owners, it's like, I think we name it risk and reward, right?
Yeah,
And
that's good.
and maybe that's like starting to pull out what are some of the words used in various industries that might map well with grief. Like a deep risk maybe is like a big grief moment or opportunity. Um, yeah, I'm not sure I haven't played in that yet, but
I like it. I like it. Like you think about a swing and a miss, or that you used a great example of like pitching a big project and getting a no, right?
mhm,
Like if you don't allow yourself to go all in on like imagining the project, right? That gets you invested. You're excited about it. You allow yourself to feel connected to it in some way,
yes,
right? And if you get a no, business I don't think there's any such thing as, business and personal. Like,
I agree. I
no,
agree.
it's all one, right? Like if you invest yourself fully, no matter what you do, then you are going to feel the sting
Hmm.
of those no's. And so what does that mean? Does that mean next time you're going to go smaller? You're going to stay in the box, right? Those are the choices. You
Yes.
could, like, I'm not going to get
Yes.
as invested, or you can learn through that process, right? That it might feel like a big grief in the moment, like in the actual moment of it happening, but in the scheme of things, that's a small grief
Yes.
that we can then like learn how to hold ourselves through, nurture ourselves through, and then still be able to show up fully the next time is what
Right.
I'm feeling.
Yeah, and as I listen to you, it's the showing up fully the next time is when you go all the way in the powers of grief into that fifth power, which is remembering, right?
Ooh,
So, okay, I've gotten to know, have my feelings about it. I held on to how good that proposal was. Like, how could they have said no? And, you know, just kind of dwelling in that a bit, looking backwards, and then breaking that hold on, well, that was so great. That was the best. Breaking that and then stepping into, okay, where do I go from here? What now? And you're right, like then showing up to the next opportunity and proposal with, okay, I've done A, B, and C tweaks, and it was because of this no, this grief moment that I'm able to climb higher, to show up bigger, to, really like call myself forward ultimately.
mm, exactly, exactly. That it feels. I mean that feels like the journey to me of we call it emotional intelligence. We call
Mhm.
different we call it by different things right now, kind of in the zeitgeist, but that what it feels truly to me like on a very internal level is self-confidence, self-love, and self-belief
Mm.
that we can move forward.
Yeah. And I would even say, perhaps before self-confidence, if a person, kind of resists that truth, is self-awareness. Like
Hmm.
that is for me what I've learned the ultimate stepping stone to self-confidence. It's a really quick skip. Once I ground into the self-awareness, I'm like, okay, I can hold my shoulders back a little bit further and like that self-confidence flows.
Mm. Oh,
Yeah.
so good. Well,
Yeah.
Krista, I'm mindful of the time. We could go on so much longer for real.
Yes.
Like we could just keep going. And there's so much more, but I also really I will want to invite everyone to go to the links, check out the book, go buy it, read it. It's so good. It's so, so good. I'm so grateful for all of the growth that you
Mm,
allowed yourself to go through to be able to write this book. And I'm
mm,
also like just so, so grateful that you're here and you're thriving.
mm.
And I mean, I was also there. I think you had just found out when you told me
Yep.
that you were diagnosed with breast cancer, and it was an honor to watch you process through that and to see you shine through it in a way only
Mm,
that you could.
mm.
So
Thank
thank you.
you. Thank you, Hannah. And uh, so I receive, thank you, and I'll just breathe that in. I will say for myself, and I believe much on behalf of many people, that you are such a safe space. You're a welcoming ear and heart to receive whatever someone's open to sharing with you. So thank you. I do remember that moment. And um, to be able to ask for you to bear witness to me in that way by sharing with you was an early step in my journey that allowed me to walk into the wellness that I have right now. I will say that all along I called it healing with and through breast cancer. I had thyroid cancer when I was much younger and I fought it. and there's nothing wrong with fighting. And yet, I think just really getting attuned to the language and receiving the support from you and from so many others was really impactful. So thank you for being that person and for this conversation. It's such a joy. I am so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Again, thank you for writing. Thank you for being you. Thank you
Mm,
for shining a light on this such a tender topic that we tend to roll ball up around and keep in the dark because it feels scary. And you
mhm,
have found a way to make it less scary. Right. In
mm.
a way, like the way I love the way you put it, that we can walk with it. We can have it be a companion and not not a scary one, but
Yes,
something that we walk through life with. So,
absolutely. Yes.
mm,
Oh, thank you. Oh, so grateful.
me too. And if anyone again wants to grab the book, if they want to connect with you, all the links are in the show notes. And is there any last words that you want to share?
Hmm. Yeah, probably simply that it's important to invite others to witness. I think that's the most radical self-love we can offer ourselves is sure, I can have my own awareness, and yet when I invite others to see me, that immediately grows. The healing, the journey, the learning. And so I guess that's my message to people is invite in support, ask for what you need and receive that with an open heart and open mind. And I think that people will be beautifully broken open. It's then allowing inviting grief versus just waiting for it to happen to you. So breaking yourself open by requesting support, I think is one of the coolest things we can do for ourselves.
Mm. Thank you so much, Krista. I love you.
Thank you. Thank you. I love you.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and be sure to like and subscribe. And again, if anything resonated with you from this episode, I would love to hear from you. Email me at Hannah, HANNAH, at expansiveceo.com and tell me about it. And if you're ready for your greatest expansion, you can find ways to work with me at expansiveceo.com and at x2wealthplanning.com. That's X, the numeral 2, wealthplanning.com. So until next time, remember that there is enough, you are enough, and your birthright in this lifetime is to be expansive.